Is everyone ready? Okay.
Yes, carry on.
Are you all ready?
Yes, yes.
All right. In that case, I will start the class. Okay.
Uttam, I'm taking dinner. I'll respond later. Okay.
All right. Okay. So, um, let's start the session then. So today is our second class of the free English session, and today we'll be talking about syntax in English. Anyone knows what is syntax in English? কেউ কি জানে এটা মানে কি syntax in English? What is syntax? I suppose none of you all know. Okay. So syntax, all right, in English. So in English, when we use syntax, it is the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language. All right. So the all right, the arrangement, okay, the arrangement of words and phrases, all right, the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences, to create well-formed sentences in a language. So, এটা মানে কি? So basically, when you use syntax in English, so don't confuse this with syntax in programming. That's a different thing. এটা হলো যে how we arrange the words. আমরা words গুলো and even the phrases, how do we arrange them in a proper sequence so that we can create well-formed sentences. আমরা কিভাবে একটা ভালো করে সাজিয়ে একটা সেন্টেন্স বানাবো, okay? This is what it means. This is the meaning of syntax in English. All right, the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language. All right. Next, moving on to the basic rules of syntax in English. So out here we've got about like 5 rules. So এখানে আমাদের 5টা rules আছে. We've got around five rules in when it concerns the basic rules of syntax in English. So the first rule is, all right, what is the first rule? The first rule is that we must at least have a subject and a verb, okay? Subject and a verb. This is the minimum requirement. For example, if I give an example, all right? For example, he is running. All right. So out here we've got he as the subject, is the helping verb, and running is the main verb. So for a complete sentence, we must at least have a subject and a verb. That is the minimum requirement. All right. So when it comes to the basic rules of syntax, this is what we must have for our first rule. Then what is our second rule? Okay, for our second rule. All right. So for our second rule, what must we have when it comes to the basic rules of syntax? So a single sentence, like in a single sentence should include one main idea. All right. So normally when we create sentences or when we make sentences, our single sentence should only have one main idea. If there are 2 or more ideas, it is best to write them in separate sentences. Okay, in separate sentences. So যদি একটা সেন্টেন্সে দেখবেন যে 2 অথবা 3টা আইডিয়াস আছে, in that case we can make them into clauses, or to simplify them you can make them into separate sentences. আমরা ওটাকে সব আলাদা আলাদা করে সেন্টেন্স ভাবে লিখতে পারবো into different sentences. All right. So this is the second rule of syntax. Okay. Now the third rule. What is the third basic rule? All right. Always এটা কিন্তু মনে রাখবেন যে, so first of all the subject always comes first. All right, the subject always comes first. Subject in a sentence. All right, subjectটা সবসময় আগে আসে, always comes first, followed by, and the verb comes second. Okay, so the subject always comes first and the verb comes second. So this is the sequence. Then যদি if the sentence has an object, all right, if the sentence has an object, it comes third. All right, so if the sentence has an object, it comes in third position after the verb. All right, so first things first, the subject always comes first. All right, and then the followed by the verb, so the verb comes after the subject. Now Judy, in a sentence, if there's an object, right, in that case it will come in a third position, which is after the verb. So this is the third rule. Now let's go to the fourth rule. All right, so in our fourth rule, what do we have? In the last class I've talked about this. These are what we call the subordinate or dependent, okay, clauses. Dependent clauses, subordinate or dependent clauses. And subordinate or dependent clauses have a subject and a verb as well. Okay, so just like our main clause or our independent clause, even our subordinate or dependent clause also have a subject and a verb. However, so when it comes to the dependent clause, it can never be complete. All right, it is an incomplete meaning, so it always relies or it is dependent on the main clause to give it a complete meaning. For example, let's say example. All right, for example, let's see, if I talked about I saw a man who was walking. Okay, so in this case, this part I will kind of highlight them. All right, I saw a man, let's put it in green. All right, so this is the independent clause or the main clause. All right, and who was walking is the dependent clause or the, as we would call it as, subordinate clause. Okay, subordinate clause. Now if you see here, I saw a man, এখানে I saw a man, আমরা এটাকে নিজের একটা সেন্টেন্স বানাতে পারবো। Alright, we can make it into a complete sentence. However, when it comes to the dependent clause or the subordinate clause, who was walking, এই who was walking টা on its own কিন্তু এটা মিনিংটা ইনকমপ্লিট, যদি বা এখানে একটা সাবজেক্ট আছে প্লাস ওদের ভার্বও আছে। Alright, if you see here, who is the subject, was is the helping verb, and walking is the main verb. So yes, subject and a verb is there, but আমরা যদি এটার সাথে যদি একসাথে না লিখি, in that case, if written out of context, এটা কিন্তু মিনিংটা কিন্তু ইনকমপ্লিট, আমরা বুঝতে পারবো না এটা কাকে নিয়ে কথা বলা হচ্ছে। But when we add the main clause, then it makes sense. I saw a man who was walking. So who was walking is describing the man. আমরা এই man কে describe করতেছি। All right, so this clause is dependent on the main clause to give it a complete meaning. All right, now let's go to our fifth rule. In our fifth rule, we talked about the adjectives and adverbs. All right, so adjectives and adverbs. Adverbs. Okay, normally they are both modifiers. Okay, which means they describe something. They are both modifiers, meaning they are descriptors. এরা হলো যে কিছু নিয়ে describe করে। all right, they describe about something. Example, let's say okay, just for context, adjectives modify nouns and adverbs modify they can modify adjectives, verbs or other adverbs in a sentence. All right, so if you see here, the fifth rule is about the adjectives and adverbs. Normally they are descriptors or they describe about the something in a sentence. All right, so normally adjectives they describe the nouns, and adverbs they describe about adjectives, verbs, or other adverbs in a sentence are, for your information, normally adjectives, they come before the noun. Okay, for example, let's say in this sentence, all right, example. Okay, let's say I will talk about he is wearing a red shirt. All right, in this case, ekhane, if you say in this sentence, this red, okay, the red is the, this red is the adjective. All right, red is the adjective, and it is describing the shirt. So shirt is the noun, আর এখানে হলো যে কি, the red মানে এই আমাদের যে শার্টটা কালারটা হলো যে red, okay, লাল. So in this case, if you see here, the adjective is describing how the shirt looks like. So in this case, the shirt is red in color. All right. So this is an example of an adjective. So normally adjective হলো যে noun আগে চলে আসে. All right. Normally they come before the noun that they are describing. Whereas in the case of adverbs, they come after the description, or they come after what they're describing. Example, let's say if I talked about example, okay, so let's say here, let's see, she talked happily. All right, so in this case, if you see here, this talked, all right, this talked is the verb, this is our verb. Okay, so let's see, so the talked is the verb and happily is the adverb. So if you see here, এখানে our adverb is describing the talking, as in the মেয়েটা কিভাবে কথা বললো, সে খুশি খুশিতে কথা বললো. Okay, she talked happily. So if you see here, this adverb happily is modifying, or it is describing the way that she talked. ও কিভাবে কথা বললো, খুশিতে কথা বললো. Okay, so this talk is being modified by the adverb happily. All right, so this is how it goes normally. In a sentence, adjectives, they come before the noun that they're modifying, and the adverbs, they come normally after the verb that they are modifying. All right, so these are the 5 kinds of, or the 5 basic rules when it comes to syntax in the English language. All right, okay, one other example let me give you here, also just for context in this sentence. Okay, now let's say he plays football. Okay, so let's say this is a simple example. All right, so in this case, he is the subject, plays is the verb, sorry, and football is the object. So this is how we maintain our sequence. Okay, if you see here, always আমাদের প্রথমে কি subject আসবে. Okay, so he is the subject, then the verb comes second, outer place, then if we have an object, in this case আমাদের object আছে football, in this case our object is the football, so he plays football. So this is the sequence. All right, now let's move on to our third section of today's session. All right, this is the types of syntax in a sentence. All right, so normally in advanced English, there are many rules, or there are many kind of, you could say, variations of syntax, but just to keep it simple, আমরা শুধু আজকে যেগুলো the most basics syntactic patterns টা শুধু ওটা নিয়ে আমরা পড়বো আজকে. Okay, the most basic lines that are required while forming sentences. So out there we've got the types of syntax, 7 syntactic patterns with syntax examples. এখানে examples of দেওয়া হবে. All right, now so এখানে obviously what is the first syntactic pattern, আমাদের প্রথম প্যাটার্নটা কি? All right, what is the first pattern? Number 1 হলো যে subject followed by verb. All right, let's say for example এখানে we will say the dog barked, কুকুরটা বাকলো. So in this case, if you see here, the dog is the subject and barked is the verb. All right, so let me just highlight this. এখানে okay, let me use not this color. Okay, the dog. All right, so this is the subject. All right, this color, and barked, sorry, and barked is the verb. So verb to, let me give another color. Let's say blue দিয়ে দিলাম. I gave it as blue. And here, if you see here, barked is the verb. So this is the first type of, you could say, syntactic patterns in a sentence. And this is an example. All right, this is the first type. Now let's go to our second type of sentence. Okay, so in our second type, এখানে কি থাকবে? All right, in our second type we've got subject, verb and direct object. All right, এখানে থাকবে, let me capitalize this, subject, then you've got verb, and then what you've got, the direct object. Okay, direct object. So here, let's say let me give an example. E dot G dot. All right, এখানে let's say direct object. Okay, he plays basketball. Okay, he plays basketball. So এখানে, if you see here, our he is the subject, our place is the verb, and our direct object is the basketball. সে কি খেলে? সে basketball খেলে. All right, so this is kind of your, okay, or like for in a context of Bangladesh, cricket is the most, like, it is a popular sport. So এখানে আমরা, let's give this cricket. He plays cricket. So he is the subject, place is the verb, and our direct object is the cricket. সে কি খেলে? সে cricket খেলে। সে কি খেলে? সে cricket খেলে। All right, so in this case our direct object is the cricket. All right, now moving on to our third syntactic pattern. Our এখানে example হলো, let's say, okay, and what is the pattern for our third type? এখানে হবে হলো যে subject, verb and subject complement. All right, subject, then we've got verb, then there is the subject complement. Okay, subject complement. Now before I explain, I give an example, I have to explain. Okay, what is a subject complement? Subject complement কি? So subject complement হলো যে basically they are, you could say, they describe how the subject is. Okay, subject complement. Normally, okay, even before that, let me talk about subject complement. All right, what is a subject complement? So a subject complement is a word or phrase that appears after a linking verb in a sentence and is closely related to the sentence's subject, identifying, defining or describing it. All right, so এখানে let me say, all right, a subject complement is a word or phrase that appears after a linking verb in a sentence and is closely related to the sentence's subject. Okay, to the sentence's subject. Identifying, defining or describing it. All right, so if you see here, defining or describing it. So just this is the, so basically হয়তো you might have a question, প্রশ্ন থাকতে পারে, what is a subject complement? All right, a subject complement is a word or phrase that appears after a linking verb. So linking verb হলো যে এই যে linking verbটা, it's almost, it acts like a bridge, মানে একটা ব্রিজের মতো কাজ করে আর কি। So এটা হলো যে linking verbটা subject আর subject complement কে লিংক করে। So that's why it is called a linking verb. All right, আর so for example, if I give a certain example, okay, এখানে একটু দিয়ে দিই, let's say if I say he is funny. All right, so এই যে subject complement, all right, this subject complement tells you about the subject, মানে how he is. All right, how the person is. So he is funny. ও হলো যে একটা funny person, এভাবে বলতে, so he is funny. All right, so this is a compliment to the subject. সে হলো যে একটা, he is funny, he is a funny person. All right, so এটা হলো যে this shows you that the person is funny. আর এই যে is, this is the linking verb because it links the subject with the subject complement. All right, now moving on to our fourth type of syntactic pattern with an example. All right, this is our fourth type of syntax or sentence structure. All right, so the fourth type is subject plus verb plus adverbial complement. Subject followed by, we've got verb, and then we've got adverbial complement. All right, now just like subject complement, what is an adverbial complement? একটা প্রশ্ন থাকতে পারে. So like you might say, what is an adverbial complement? So in this case, if you talk about an adverbial complement, all right, now let me go through it. In this case, adverbial complement. So just give me a sec. Adverbial complement is a word or phrase that appears, all right, is a word or phrase that appears after the verb. Okay, that appears after the, that appears after the verb in a sentence. Okay, in a sentence, if there are no objects before it. If there are no objects before it. All right, so like there's subject, there's verb, and if there's no object or no direct object, then we can place the adverbial complement right away. যদি এখানে, if there was an object, then the object would come before the adverbial complement. But in this case, if there are no objects, then we place the adverbial complement right after the verb. Okay, and adverbial complement, they kind of describe the verb. All right, they describe the verb. Now for example, in this case, all right, okay, let's say I'll give you a sentence example. All right, the dog ate hungrily. All right, কুকুরটা খুব মানে ওর খিদে লাগেছিল আর he ate very hungrily. All right, so in this case, the dog ate hungrily. He was quite hungry, and so when he ate it, he was like, he ate it like probably really fast. He ate hungrily. Now in this case, if you see here, the dog, so the dog is the subject, ate is the verb, and this is the adverbial complement. All right, so in this case, so ate is the, so ate is the verb, and then the hungrily, this is the adverbial complement. Okay, adverbial complement. This adverbial complement is describing the way of the eating. How was it? How did the dog eat? It ate hungrily. So this adverbial complement, it is describing the verb, the way of the eating. So how did the dog eat? It ate hungrily. All right. So in a way, this is modifying the verb ate. All right. So this is the fourth type of, you could say, syntactic pattern in a sentence structure. Now let's go into the fifth type. Okay, let's go to the fifth type. Now in the fifth type, we've got subject, verb, indirect object, and direct object. All right, so this is the fifth type of syntactic pattern in a, you could say, in a like in syntax. So subject followed by, we've got the verb, then there is the indirect object followed by the direct object. All right, so just to give you the context, what is an indirect object and how is it different from a direct object? All right. So a direct object receives the action from the subject. All right. While an indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. Okay. So direct object হলো যে ওরা subject থেকে direct actionটা receive করে, whereas an indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. For example, if I give an okay innocent example, all right, he gave me a camera. All right, in this case এখানেও যে the camera is the direct object and receive আমি করলাম, so I am the receiver of the direct object and ক্যামেরাটা আমাকে দেওয়া হলো, so in this case I am the receiver of the direct object. And what is direct object? So in this case let's break this down. All right, so he is the subject. All right, then we've got here gave is the verb, then we've got me, which is the indirect object. Okay, indirect object, and camera is the direct object. Now in this case, as you can see here from this statement, direct object receives the action from the subject, এই যে ক্যামেরাটা. Okay, so this is the action is received for the camera. Now what is an indirect object? An indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. So if you see here, obviously এখানে like so I'm the indirect object and I am the receiver of the camera, so I'm the receiver of the direct object. All right, so this is the fifth type of syntactic pattern in a sentence. All right, next. Okay, let me just
Uttam,
capitalize this. Yep.
could you please explain the difference between indirect object and direct object?
I think I've explained that just now. Okay, so
Sorry, I
here
missed it.
as you can see here, the direct object. Okay, the direct object receives the action from the subject. All right, so it's like he gave me a camera, so he, right, and what is the object? The object is the camera. Okay, so direct action receives the action from the subject. So just to kind of simulate this for you, so he is the subject and camera is the direct object. All right, and what is an indirect object? An indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. So if you see here, he gave me a camera, so what did I get? I got the camera. Is that clear? So an indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. So he gave me what? He gave me a camera, and who is the receiver? I am the receiver of the camera, so I am the receiver of the direct object. So in this case, an indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. Is that clear?
Yes, clear.
Is that
Thank you.
clear? Okay, yep. All right, so does anyone have any other questions? Anybody else? কার কি আর প্রশ্ন আছে? Anybody in this matter? থাকলে বলতে পারেন, no issues, you can ask me if anybody has any other questions. Okay, I hope, I suppose none. In that case, I'll be moving on to the sixth type of syntactic pattern. All right, the sixth type. So in this case, okay, so let's see. In the sixth type, we've got subject, verb, direct object, and object complement. All right, so subject, sorry, then verb, then object, or we can say the direct object. Yep, the direct object, and we've also got the object complement. Oh yeah, one other thing that I want to add is that an indirect object. All right, this is kind of, you can see a star mark, something just to know, it's quite important. And okay, and okay, let's just put this. An indirect object can only come after the verb and before the direct object. So this is the only place. It can never come in another position. All right, so Okay. All right. So this is just to explain to you. In this case, always an indirect object can only come after the verb and before the direct object. In a sentence, it cannot be there in any other place. So this is the verb and this is the direct object. So it can only come in between that, and it can come in nowhere else. আর কোনো জায়গাতে আসতে পারে না। It can only come in between the a verb আর direct objecটের মাঝখানে আসতে পারে, অন্য জায়গাতে কিন্তু আসতে পারে না। Alright, this is where an indirect object can you could say can thrive, or you could say this is where, or the only place where it is, you could say viable, or এখানে আমরা রাখতে পারি। Now let's go to the sixth type of syntactic pattern. Now in number 6, as you can see here, this is the structure: subject plus verb plus direct object and object complement. So as I've explained to you before in this class, complement হলো যে কি, it describes basically what something is doing. So in this case এখানে complement, object complement, what it means that object complement হলো যে it will describe about the direct object. Okay, এটা হলো যে object কে describe করবে। So let's say for example, all right, the dog made the ball dirty. Now in this case, if you see here, the dog is the subject, made is the verb, which is the obviously the past tense, then the direct object is the ball, and dirty is the object complement, because what did the ball become? The ball has become dirty. All right, so this dirty is describing the ball, a ball ke describe kora hocche. All right, so as you can see here, the dirty is the object complement for the ball. What has the ball become? The ball has become dirty. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now moving on to the last type of syntactic pattern in a sentence, and this is the structure for the last type. Okay, number 7. Now in this case, we've got subject, verb, direct object and adverbial complement. Okay, adverbial complement. So if I see here, yep, so this is the one: subject, verb, then you've got direct object and adverbial complement. All right, so keep this in mind, that an adverbial complement describes the verb. Okay, so এখানে হলো যে, if you see here, we have the subject, the verb, the direct object and the adverbial complement. What does adverbial complement do? It kind of gives, or it kind of describes the verb or gives more information about the verb. All right, now this will be the structure. Okay, so this is the one. Let's say he lifted his head up. Okay, so in this case, if you see here, he is the subject, lifted is the verb, his head is the object, and up is the adverbial complement, because it describes what he did. What did he do? He lifted. ওর মাথাকে উপরে তুললো. Okay, so he lifted his head up. So this up kind of, it describes the verb lifted. ও মাথা কি করলো? ও মাথাটা উপরে নিয়ে গেল, অথবা like he kind of his head up. All right, ও মাথাকে, you could say in Bangla, I don't know how to say it, probably if somebody can help me in Bangla. He lifted his head up. ওর মাথাকে উপরে তুললো. Is that it? Probably that will be the description, I suppose. So উপরে তুললো. So উপরে তুললো, right? So this উপরে up, তুললো, so lifted. Okay, so this উপরে হলো যে ওই তুললোকে, it is kind of you could say describing, or it's kind of telling about that. All right, so this up in this sentence, this is the adverbial complement. Up is the adverbial complement, and lifted is the verb. So if you see here, the up, উপরে তুললো। সো উপরে হলো যে it is kind of describing the তুলানো, মানে কিভাবে তুললো, উপরে তুললো। So he lifted his head up. All right. So as you can see here, this adverbial complement is kind of giving more information about the lifting. All right. So this kind of completes the 7 types of syntactic patterns. You can say out here. Let's see, where is that? Yep, syntactic patterns in a sentence. Now we have almost come to the end of our session. Before we close today's session, does anyone have any questions? কারো কি কোনো প্রশ্ন আছে? Since the start, like from the session যেখান থেকে আমরা শুরু করলাম, does anyone have any questions in regards to today's session? You can speak up now if you wish to do so. কারো যদি প্রশ্ন থাকে, does anyone have any questions? Anybody? Anyone? No questions? Okay. I suppose if that is so, we can end the session. Sohail, do you have any questions? Or Subhashish, any questions?
No questions.
No questions. So was today's session clear to you? Was everything clear?
Yes.
Yes, right? Okay. So was it helpful in terms of understanding the sentence structure and how we form sentences? So obviously syntax is an advanced topic. এখানে অনেক কিছু শেখানো আছে, but in terms of when we form sentences, it has a basic structure গুলো সাতটা. Like at least this is what you should know. And if you wanna learn more about syntax, you can look it up on the internet. আর এটা নিয়ে অনেক কিছু বলা আছে, but those are kind of quite advanced. So for now, just stick to the simple and the basics. All right. And who else is there into this session? Let's see. Shopon or Ratan or Ratan. Does anyone have any other questions? Anybody? Shopon বা Ratan. Do you have any questions? কারো প্রশ্ন আছে? If not, I will conclude today's session. যদি কারো কোনো প্রশ্ন না থাকে.
If you have no problem, you can overview the whole session.
Okay.
Shortly.
Once again. Okay, sure. All right. I'll go like you could say a summary of today's session. All right. So first things first. As I said previously, what is syntax in English? So in English, syntax means the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in the English language. Now, obviously, before we kind of go through the structure, we have to understand the basic rules of syntax in English. All right. So in the first basic rule, we have to have at least a subject and a verb. So he is running. Subject is the helping verb. Running is the main verb. And it is kind of, it is ideal to have only one main idea in a sentence. Normally, if you have two or more ideas, it is best to write them in separate sentences. Now, for the third rule, normally, as usual, in a sequence, the subject comes first, then the verb, and if you have an object, then the object comes. So in the first position, we've got the subject, then the verb, then the object. All right. Then in the fourth kind of the rule, we also know that a dependent clause, or as we say, the subordinate clause, also has a subject and a verb. But a dependent clause is dependent on the main verb to give it a complete meaning. Now, in terms of the fifth rule, if we talked about the adjectives and the adverbs, all right? So they're both modifiers, but they modify different, you could say, words in a sentence. So an adjective modifies a noun or a pronoun. An adverb, they usually modify adjectives, verbs, or other adverbs in a sentence. So normally, you could say an adjective comes before the noun it modifies. Example here, he's wearing a red shirt. So it is modifying the shirt and it comes before the noun shirt. And in terms of adverb, it normally comes after the verb, okay? So she talked happily. So in this case, it comes after the word talked. Now, then we've come to the last part of our today's topic, which is the types of syntax. And we've got 7 syntactic patterns in a sentence, all right? First things first, subject and verb, which is, as you can see, the dog barked. Then you've got subject, verb, and direct object. He plays cricket. So subject, then this is the verb is the place, and cricket is the direct object. Then we've got subject, verb, and subject complement. So complement is basically when you're kind of, it describes about, you could say it could be about the subject or the object, or even about the verb. All right. So in this case, he is funny. So this, out if you see here, this funny describes the person, that he is a funny person. All right. Then you've got subject, verb, and adverbial complement. So normally an adverbial complement is a word or phrase that appears after the verb in a sentence if there are no objects before it, and it kind of describes the verb. All right. The dog ate hungrily. So in this case, if you see here, the hungrily, it is describing the eating, that the dog ate hungrily. Next we've got, you could say here, subject, verb, direct object, and direct object. So once again, the direct object receives the action from the subject, while indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. He gave me a camera. So if you see here, he is the subject, gave is the verb, me is the indirect object, and camera is the direct object. Then we've got the sixth type of syntactic pattern: subject, verb, direct object, and object complement. The dog made the ball dirty. So in this case, this object complement is telling about the ball. What has the ball become? The ball has become dirty. Who made it? The dog made the dog made the ball dirty. Now in the last step, we've got subject, verb, direct object, and adverbial complement. So in this case, this adverbial complement will describe the verb. ও কি করলো? ও ওর মাথাটা উপরে তুললো। So উপরে তুললো। So উপরে তুললোকে basically modify করে। All right. So that kind of sums up our session for today. And I think, does anyone have any other questions? That's about it. And obviously, this session is recorded, so you all can watch it again. It will be posted on our Facebook page, and as well as you could say on probably in our messenger group as well. It will be posted there. The link will be posted. You can watch it again if you wish to do so. All right. And so I see that there are how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, like 4 members into this session. If there are no other questions, I would like to conclude this session. Does
Okay,
anyone
you
have
can close the session.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to everyone that attended to this session, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. For now, take care, good night, and I'll see you all again.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
So,
Okay, good